We're going to talk about today is the decree behind defeat. We begin in the wreckage of a nation. The natural eye, the opening of Daniel 1, looks at the geopolitical catastrophe. We see Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, descending upon Jerusalem like a predator. To the world, it looked like Babylon was stronger than God. But look at Daniel 1:2. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, with part of the vessels of the house of God. This is an important phrase in the chapter. It wasn't that Nebuchadnezzar was a military genius. It was that the Lord gave the king of Judah into his hands. God was the one in control of the defeat. Why? Because Israel had broken God's law for 490 years. They refused to give the land its rest, and now God was evicting to collect 70 years of Sabbath rest that the land deserved. That was the main thing, but there was many other things. They'd started worshiping other gods. They'd started doing things that they really shouldn't have been doing, and they knew they shouldn't be doing. But they were so enamored with the cultures around them that they forgot God. It says in 2 Chronicles 36:21, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept the Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. Now, in the Bible, 70 years, that's 70 years, okay? That's 6 plus 7, so it's in tens. It's not in units of one. Even in capacity, even in captivity, God is the one setting the terms. Nebuchadnezzar thinks he's the master, but the Bible shows us he is just a servant being used by God to perform a judicial correction of his people. In this time, we have some young men pop up that we want to talk about. And the reason we want to talk about it is because of the battle for identity. If you don't understand who you are and what you are in Christ, you're going to be pulled asunder. Everybody's going to be pulling you and trying to bring you into some things that you're not. So you need to understand your identity. Nebuchadnezzar didn't just want their bodies, he wanted their minds. He wanted the best young man, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he tried to distort and overwrite their identity. He wanted to crush who they were so he could remold them in the image of Babylonians. He didn't just want them. He wanted the good of them, but he wanted to mix into them what he had so they would stand and forget who they were as Jews. The first thing he did was to change their names. He wanted to erase the name of God from their lives and replace it with the names of false gods. Daniel, as God is my judge, became Belshazzar, Baal's prince. Now we know Baal runs all the way back to Nimrod, and he's actually got another name named Moloch, where they took and put the babies in the hands of the statue when it was red hot and fire hot, and it went in and they had drums beating and everything going on so the mothers wouldn't hear the screams of the children. Hananiah, the grace of the Lord, became Shadrach, command of Aku. That's the moon god. You hear him called today by the name Allah. Mishael, who is like God, became Meshach, that draws with force. That's Aku's power. He runs the tides. He changes the tides and things. He draws with force. So that's the power that Aku supposedly has. Azariah, the Lord is my helper, becomes Abednego, servant of Nego. That's the God of wisdom in the Babylonian cult. The world will always try to give you a new name. It will try to label you with your problems, by your problems, your past, or your surroundings. It wants to twist the truth of who you are in Christ until you can't remember whose you are. It wants you to forget that the throne of God is your true source of authority. So you got to look for your source. That's should be the purpose of your heart. The king offered him a daily portion of the king's meat. This sounded like a blessing, but it was a trap. This meat had been offered to idols To eat it was to tell the world that you were being sustained by the world system instead of God. Now, we don't have them problem now, but back then they couldn't eat anything that was offered to idols. We know now that idols nothing. Daniel 1:8 tells us, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Now, we aren't under Old Testament, like I said, dietary laws, but Paul tells us that an idol is nothing, but the principle for us in 2026 is exactly the same. Who is your source? The world has a portion it wants you to eat. It wants you to feed on its fears, its philosophies, and its way of doing things. It tells you that if you don't consume what everyone else is consuming, you shall fall behind. But Daniel proves that when you stick to the simple provisions of God, His word and His ways, you are operating under a different jurisdiction. You are saying, I don't need the world and its pleasures to be successful. I have a king who blesses me. Now we come to a 10-day test that they provided. Daniel proposed a test. He didn't get up there and say, I'm not eating what you've given me. I'm going to stand for God. He didn't make a big old fool of himself. He just said, hey, okay, look, this is what I want to do. Let's make a test. And if it works out for my good, great, we'll do it that way. But if it doesn't, I'll do it your way. Daniel proposed a test. He gave the pulse, vegetables, seeds, and water for 10 days. He was betting his life on the fact that God's way is better than the world's way. Now, it's not a diet. It's not something that God commanded to do, but he couldn't eat the other stuff because it was sacrificed to idols. So he had to find something that wasn't being sacrificed to idols and to eat. And he's betting God will take what he has and bless him with it and keep him separate the way he's asking him to be. Now, God worked that way back then, physically, but he does it now spiritually, and we'll see this. Now look at Daniel 1:15. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance was appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children who did eat the portion of the king's meat. Now, it's funny in 2026 that you don't want to be calling people fatter, but it was a good thing for them back then. Now, why did this work? Vegetables and water shouldn't make you healthier than the king's steak and wine. The answer is in Daniel 1:17. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. The test worked because it was a judicial reward, because they honored the throne by refusing the king's meat. God physically and intellectually intervened. When you stay anchored to God's standards, He overrides the natural laws. He performs a divine intervention to prove that His way is superior to the world's input. Now, let me give you an example of this. When I was in Kansas, I knew a man, and the man couldn't read at all. Now, I had trouble learning to read. I was like 7th grade before I really got a hold of it, and I still can't write. It's horrible. But he couldn't read, he couldn't write. He just did not have the ability. But his mama used to read him the Bible, and I have to tell you, I don't know of any man who's remembered more scriptures than that guy did. Couldn't write a one of them. Couldn't read a one of them. But God overrode and gave it to him in his mind. God will override if you stand for Him. Your weaknesses can become your strengths. Now look, they did their test and they were 10 times better. Now these 4 men finally stood before the king. The results was undeniable. Daniel 1:20 says, in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. When you refuse to let the world distort your identity, God gives you a wisdom that the world cannot match. As one commentator noted, true wisdom is not found in the learning of the Chaldeans, but in the fear of the Lord, which remains constant even in a foreign land. And notice how the chapter ends in verse 21. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. Nebuchadnezzar's empire eventually fell, but Daniel stayed. The world system will always crumble, but the soul that is anchored in the throne of God will outlast them all. Now, I don't know who this reaches, but I want you to understand something. God doesn't require you to be perfect. God doesn't require you to not have sin. God doesn't require you to not have failings. God doesn't require you to be the smartest. God requires that you be willing. In the story of Gideon, the thing that won the battle is when the men surrounded the camp of the Midianites and they broke the pots and then the light shined through. Paul talks about that we're just vessels. And what he's really saying is we're just cracked pots. God can't use you till he breaks you or lets the world break you. And that's when the light shines through. So don't doubt what God's doing. He could use a Daniel. He can use a you. May God bless you. May you continue to read and study the Word. And I will see you as soon as I can. I'm sorry I haven't been here. I've been doing some studying and it's been taking up a lot of my time. But I'm trying to get it so I can give it to y'all. Y'all have a blessed day.